Let's face it, art is subjective. One can argue the artistic merits of literally any observable phenomena. Except at Sony, art is exclusively viewed in terms of marketability. Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Today is one of our darker days here on the channel. After all, not all news is good news. While cases of anime censorship pile, the way Sony has handled marketing The Last of Us 2 is a massive slap across the face to fans who once loved the PlayStation as a dominant hub for Japanese gaming. As adorable as these PS5 waifu are, as skilled as the artists behind them are, Sony is not on our side. Seriously, these brilliant drawings wouldn't actually be allowed in a game for the console itself. Isn't that ironic? Before we get to that, however, I want to point out a particularly scummy thing that Funimation has recently pulled. I mentioned in a previous video how they effectively pulled all of their distribution for the brothel anime Ishizoku reviewers. After all, they are a business, a terrible one, but a business nonetheless. They don't have to release anything they work on, legally anyway, but even the smallest amount of human integrity would encourage them to then sell the show's rights to a company that will release the show. We have laws against monopolies for this exact logic. If only one company provides a service, they have no standards to meet. They have no reason to provide genuine quality. When a competitor emerges, however, companies have to stay on their toes and keep their consumers happy, else they go with a superior alternative. Media distribution rights have sadly fallen into a sort of monopolistic practice. So long as Funimation hoards the rights to Ishizoku, nobody else in the market can offer it instead. It's worse than getting a crappy service because there's no service at all. As an American or Canadian citizen, it is absolutely impossible to legally pay for an English release of the show, sub or dub. If we were talking about an essential service like clean water or oxygen, you'd see the ethical consequence. You can't really judge someone for breaking the law if there's literally no way to survive while following it. People shouldn't have to just sit down and die if they haven't done anything wrong, thus they'll take their lives into their own hands. Now, obviously, anime is not an essential service. As much as I hate to say it, I could technically survive, albeit miserably, without my daily dose of waifu. Yet one idea still stands. Should we have to just give up on a show whenever a company won't legally release it? If Funimation won't sell it to us, how on earth could they profit from our interest in it? In this exceptionally bizarre case, piracy definitively has no victim. Pirating Ishizoku in Funimation's market doesn't rob anyone on the planet of a single dime. Not even importing is a viable option when studios haven't translated anything. Though imagine if you could buy Japanese Blu-rays and then patch them with subs. Not an entirely bad idea. Point is, Funimation won't release the damn show, so why should they care if people pirate it? They shouldn't, but they do. Some hardy fellows took to P-Hub and uploaded compilations from the show, making it that much more convenient to experience. Admittedly, it's a vulnerable move, as other streaming sites tend to be more evasive, but that's hardly the point. Funimation went ahead and issued DMCA takedowns for these compilations, meaning that, in addition to not releasing the show, they're also actively stopping people from seeing it through other venues. The only acceptable reason for this I can think of is if Funimation were removing the vids to prevent other markets, such as Japan, from using them to pirate the show. But if that's the case, why Funimation? God forbid a Japanese company issue the DMCA. Anyone trying to create anime content on YouTube knows such agents exist. You know, like the company that flagged my down-to-the-frame vids on Heaven's Feel. Ultimately, it's just horrible. Funimation's sitting their fat arse on an anime that deserves to be released just like all others, especially due to its popularity and potential market. But for some reason, Funimation's putting its standards first. Which is really the topic for today's video, isn't it? Just what do these standards do for a business? Are companies truly ensuring a seal of family friendliness for their products by touting a moral high ground? Of course not. But they want you to believe they are. Bluntly, companies like Funimation and Sony don't really care about ethics or values at all, but they've somehow got the idea that such things are coveted in the US. Thus, companies are attempting to profit off of people's sensitivities, hoping to be labeled by various positive buzzwords. I say this because anyone with a brain can look at what Sony's doing and notice abundant hypocrisy. They censor anime games without shame, and yet market those same censored aspects in other games when it suits them. The lack of consistency is baffling, at least compared to how Japan handles things. This is literally as raunchy as it gets when it comes to Japanese console games. This right here. Marie Rose in the Fortune bikini shows off the maximum amount of skin you will ever see in an anime game made for consoles. Whether it be through long flowing hair or comedic strobes of light, you will never see beyond what this bikini covers, no matter the context, pose, or any other more risque application. This standard mostly mimics the standards of actual adult content in Japan, filmed, drawn, or rendered. She could take her top off, sure, but even in the world's most creative and perverse nation, you'll see a blurry mosaic covering her nethers if she disrobes anymore. No joke, even adult anime, manga, and games require fans to patch Japan's native censorship. Long story short, if you've ever seen a nude Barbie doll, you've seen the equivalent of this image, which is in turn the worst Japan can offer. When put like that, there isn't much to fear, is there? In fact, it's only a few centimeters of peach-colored flesh more than the girl in Grand Theft Auto V's promo art, and yet that game's being hyped for yet another release on the PlayStation 5. Frustratingly, Sony demands Japanese games follow a stricter standard than Western titles. Naturally, given that Sony is now an American-based company, it makes sense. Works from other regions are always looked at more carefully than domestic works. America gets away with murder in its cartoons, like South Park, and even forces comedic nudity into nasty-ass cartoons like SpongeBob, Ren and Stimpy, as well as Big Mouth, which features horny teens. Ironically, the primary criticism hurled at anime. Conversely, Japan tends to censor a lot of gore and full-frontal nudity from Western games. Dante's Inferno comes to mind. At least Japan is consistent, though. As long as it doesn't show any genitalia, it's good to go for mature-rated titles. And that's the issue, really. While I could frustratingly understand the censorship for more kid-friendly titles, we're talking exclusively about M-rated games. What is Sony so afraid of with Trish's bare butt? Turns out they aren't afraid of nudity at all, so long as it helps them fit the image they're trying to sell. The Last of Us 2 is a game that I have no genuine interest in playing. The first game was fun, albeit heavily overrated from a Western bias. I enjoyed playing it though, twice through even. For the sequel, the devs are clearly aiming the series in a new direction, with an undeniable focus on more LGBT representation. That in itself isn't inherently bad at all. The idea of playing as Ellie seemed quite fun, actually. I just have no interest in this new character, Abby, who, while not trans as initially suspected, is still quite masculine looking. Again, not bad, just not my preference. There are a lot of strange marketing tactics being used on this game, including one that states the game wasn't made to be fun, perhaps as a means of justifying its gratuitous and realistic violence. Thus, it's being sold to us as more of an artistic statement or experience rather than a typical game. Okay, whatever. Seems contentious, but I can accept that it's clearly not for me. What I can't accept, however, is that the game features a full-on sex scene between Abby and some other guy. You can find the leak on YouTube, but it's got Abby tossing her top and revealing her uncensored breasts before getting into something out of Source Filmmaker. So why does The Last of Us get special treatment, allowed to be more explicit than literally every anime game officially released on PlayStation consoles? The reason seems to be that this particular sex scene, because it's not about fun, is artistic and tasteful. Get over yourself, Sony. There is no conceivable reason why a scene like this has to be shown on screen other than for its gratuitous nature. No reason why Naughty Dog couldn't have just done what most movies have done, by showing the kiss before panning up to the ceiling. Basically, if it's for one of the most critically hyped games or developers, Sony is willing to not only look the other way on its family-friendly policies, but even actively bank off its explicit nature by calling it artistic. Is this somehow supposed to be more important because of the realism? One would think more exaggerated characters would be less explicit by nature, and therefore more acceptable. Is it a statement about romance or lust in a harsh, war-torn land? Code Vein also has quite the dark premise, and yet if there were any intercourse in that game, it would have been denied its release. Is it because Abby's intercourse isn't designed to be pleasurable for audiences to watch? That would be dealing with another entirely subjective endeavor. Apparently Lucy O'Brien, an executive editor for IGN, thinks this is justification. She thinks everyone complaining, like me, are just butthurt about a sex scene not being made for our titillation. You can tell she's being combative instead of rational because she tries to throw virgins under the bus. She later apologizes for the remark, but it proves that she's more interested in vilifying others than establishing a solid point. She asserts that sex in media isn't always meant for titillation, but she's completely ignoring the fact that nobody cares. It's not an issue that this scene in The Last of Us 2 exists. It's that it exists while so many other, less revealing titles are butchered. The idea that it's okay to show something horrible or mature so long as it's not enticing isn't new either. Presumably, the show Big Mouth can get away with looting teens because the characters are so butt-ugly that nobody would be turned on by it. People legitimately complain that Western games are intentionally making women less feminine, less conventionally attractive, so that they can have strong women in games without objectifying them. That's no excuse. If anything, it just makes the potentially offensive content all the more offensive because now it's hideous. Just remember, folks, the reason our anime games are being censored isn't because they're too mature or raunchy. It's because we like them. Yes, it's the fact that we like them, regardless of actual content, that makes them wrong. So why is it that I can use my PlayStation to stare at Abby's nips and not Trish's rear? Financial bias, really. No matter how much Sony tries to allow this under artistic merit, we all know it's a gimmick. Abby's scene in this game is just as promiscuously voyeuristic as anything you'll see coming from Japan, more so even. At least Japan's not lying about it, though. Senran Kagura wears its exposure proudly, and for all its comedic absurdity, is still tamer than the game Sony's hoisting up most now. The whole thing's just a huge insult, really, considering how extremely skilled anime artists are. How dare you not call this art? Thankfully, this dark cloud has a silver lining, and that's Nintendo. It's funny how I started this channel in part because of the terrible things Nintendo was doing to its own games, but I'm genuinely pleased by the progress they've made since the release of the Nintendo Switch. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate got censored in parts due to a restrictive ratings board that hates short skirts and Mai Shiranui. Given Smash is supposed to be kid-friendly, Sakurai kinda had his hands tied. Then there was the Switch port of Tokyo Mirage Sessions. I legit don't think that was Nintendo's fault, but rather a terribly stubborn move on Atlus for not wanting to put in the extra work to fix all the prior changes they made. To counter these instances are several cases where titles are released for both Sony and Nintendo, giving players the chance to subvert Sony's censorship. It's gotten to the point where devs and localizers are prioritizing the Switch release, leaving PlayStation with the digital-only stuff. The nastiest part of this is that boycotting doesn't necessarily work. If censored anime games don't sell on the PlayStation, then Sony will just think Westerners don't like anime games in general, ignoring the fact that they're the reason for the boycott in the first place. At the end of the day, I'm pissed that some game I personally don't care much about is getting special treatment from Sony, leaving me feeling attacked for preferring games the company clearly doesn't value as much. Their more recent policies are a complete joke, and have nothing to do with actually improving content for younger audiences, given how Sony goes after mature-rated titles that take on that rating specifically so they can avoid children. Believe me, if anime games could net Sony the same profits as Naughty Dog can, I'm sure they'd find some bullshit excuse to justify a bit of TNA. Ironically though, anime games simply aren't going to thrive on PlayStation when they're being treated as inferior, ultimately losing Sony easy money. The sad part is, Sony's gonna make tons of money off The Last of Us, and will be so blinded by that revenue they won't be able to notice all the extra cash they could be gaining just by allowing some more virtual Barbie dolls on the console to appear to the adults they were made for. Still, here are some things we as fans can do to help the situation. If a platform doesn't censor a game, buy from them. Every time a game is censored on PlayStation but not Switch or PC, buy the uncensored versions and let the publishers know what influenced your decision. If a company releases a game outside of Japan with native English subtitles, such as with Dead or Alive Extreme 3, then take the effort to import it. Let Japanese devs know they can sell directly to us without going through a middleman. As for Sony, be relentless. Call them out each and every time they pull this crap. Make every tweet at Sony and PlayStation. Ask employees to forward your concerns to higher-ups. Let actual people in the company know our plea. The most important part is to never remain silent. I, for one, will keep spreading the word. Feel free to let me know on social media whenever issues like this arise, and I will do my part to escalate our concerns. That said, I now leave the floor to you all in the comments. What are some other examples of hypocritical censorship out there? Do you think The Last of Us is really doing something more tasteful than what Japanese devs are doing? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching! If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and, most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of my anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content. If you want to support me directly, there are now 3 ways that all provide the same benefits. You can click Join here on YouTube, or join Patreon or Subscribestar for access to exclusive vids and early access. As always, celebrate your fandom!